Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are stepping through the veil of time to explore the longest, the wildest, and without a doubt, the most important chapter in all of human history. We are leaving the modern world behind to journey deep into the Stone Age. I want you to imagine a time long before history even began, long before the first king was crowned or the first empire fell. There were no cities, no forged metals, no roads, and absolutely no written words to remember your name. There was just the raw, unforgiving, untamed earth and the daily, brutal struggle simply to survive to see another sunrise.
This is the Stone Age, and it is incredibly important to understand that this is not just some brief passing chapter in our distant past. It is the core of who we are. It is the longest and the most critical period in the entire human story, an era spanning a mind-boggling 2.5 million years. To truly understand who we are today, why we think the way we do, why we form tribes, and why we crave the things we crave, we must go all the way back to the very beginning. Scientists and archaeologists call this vast, ancient era the Paleolithic, which simply means the Old Stone Age.
Our story begins with the Lower Paleolithic. You have to realize that the Earth looked entirely different back then. It was an unpredictable world of violently shifting climates, thick, untamed wilderness, and massive, terrifying, dangerous predators that saw our tiny ancestors as nothing more than a quick meal.
But then, against all odds, enter Homo habilis, a species affectionately known as the handyman. Walking upright on two legs across the sweeping plains of Africa, they were the very first creatures on Earth to look down, grasp a simple rock, and understand the profound concept that it could be used as a tool.
They created what we now call Oldowan tools. By intentionally and carefully striking one hard stone against another, they managed to break off a razor-sharp flake. It seems like an incredibly simple action to us now, but in that moment, that single strike literally changed the entire course of natural history. With these newly invented sharp flakes, our ancestors were no longer defenseless scavengers. They could finally slice through thick hides to butcher meat and crack open heavy bones to get to the rich, fatty marrow inside. This sudden, massive boost of a protein-rich diet is exactly what fueled the biological growth of a much larger, far more complex brain.
But human evolution certainly didn't just stop there. Roughly 2 million years ago, a brand new player stepped onto the world stage, Homo erectus. They were a massive upgrade, taller, much stronger, built for endurance running, and looking far more human-like than anyone who came before them.
Homo erectus was a natural-born traveler with an urge to explore. Driven by curiosity and changing climates, they became the absolute first of our ancient relatives to bravely leave the African continent. They spread far and wide, marching deep into Europe and across Asia, constantly adapting their survival skills to face completely new environments and bizarre new challenges. However, despite their travels, their absolute greatest discovery wasn't a physical tool you could hold in your hand. It was the taming of a terrifying, wild force of nature. For the first time in Earth's history, they harnessed the power of fire. Gaining control over fire changed the rules of the game forever. It meant they finally had warmth to survive the freezing cold, a bright shield of protection to keep terrifying night predators at bay, and most importantly, it gave them the incredible ability to cook their food.
Cooking meat and tough plants made digestion so much easier, which released even more vital energy to power our growing brains. But fire did something else, too. The glowing campfire naturally became the very first social hub. It was the place where people gathered after a hard day, the birthplace of language, of sharing knowledge, and of storytelling.
As thousands of years slowly turned into tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands of years, the world continued to transform. Ice ages came and went, carving the earth, and eventually the long chapter of the Lower Paleolithic naturally gave way to a more advanced era, the Middle Paleolithic. This fascinating new era, which kicked off roughly 300,000 years ago, primarily belongs to two major heavyweight groups of humanity. Up in the freezing, brutal environments of Europe, you had the mighty Neanderthals. And down in the warming plains of Africa, you had the early ancestors of our own species, Homo sapiens. Now, let's get one thing straight. Neanderthals were absolutely not the slow, dumb, primitive brutes that popular myth makes them out to be. They were incredibly intelligent, highly adapted survivors built perfectly for the freezing ice age. And they were brilliant, skilled hunters armed with highly sophisticated, deadly tools. They developed what we call the Mousterian tool technology. Instead of just randomly smashing rocks until they got a sharp edge, they carefully shaped a stone core with intense premeditation. They essentially mapped out the tool in their minds first, striking it perfectly to create highly specialized, razor-sharp points, scrapers, and hand axes. You have to understand that hunting in the Middle Paleolithic was a brutally dangerous business. There were no long-range bows or traps that did the work for you. Securing a meal required terrifying, close-range physical confrontation with massively armored, incredibly powerful beasts like the giant woolly mammoth. Because of this extreme danger, brave hunters had to work together as a highly coordinated, tightly knit team. They communicated, strategized, and drove these massive animals into muddy traps or forced them over steep cliffs. It was incredibly high risk, where one mistake meant death, but it offered an amazingly high reward that could feed a whole tribe. But the Middle Paleolithic doesn't just show us better tools and bolder hunting tactics. It reveals something else entirely, something profoundly beautiful. Deep inside quiet caves, we find the very first undeniable evidence of complex rituals, deep emotional connection, and genuine care for the dead. When archaeologists find these deliberate, careful burials, often with tools or animal bones placed nearby, it strongly suggests that these ancient people pondered the mysteries of an afterlife. Or, at the very least, it proves they felt deep, heartbreaking grief for their loved ones. It is the very first spark of human spirituality. Meanwhile, far to the south in the sun-drenched savannas of Africa, our own direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, were rapidly evolving. Anatomically modern humans, possessing the exact same brain capacity and looking just like you and me, were finally ready to step out of the shadows and make their grand move across the planet. Around 50,000 years ago, a massive shift occurred, pushing us into the Upper Paleolithic. Anthropologists often call this thrilling era the Great Leap Forward in human behavior. It was as if a light switch was suddenly flipped inside the human brain, sparking a tidal wave of unimaginable creativity and complex thought.
Suddenly, the basic art of tool-making completely exploded in both variety and cleverness. We stop seeing just heavy stones and start seeing beautifully crafted blades, tiny piercing needles, and barbed fishhooks carefully carved from lightweight bone, shiny ivory, and tough animal antlers. We became masters of our materials. And with the invention of those tiny bone needles came a massive survival advantage: tightly tailored, custom-fit clothing. Humans could now expertly sew together distinct, overlapping layers of warm furs and tough animal hides, which practically gave them an armor against the weather, allowing them to finally march northward and conquer the absolute coldest climates on Earth.
But looking back, the most absolutely stunning achievement of the entire Upper Paleolithic wasn't a practical weapon or a warm coat. It was something entirely symbolic, something born from imagination. For the first time in Earth's long history, human beings created art. Crawling deep inside massive, pitch-black cave systems like Lascaux and Chauvet, illuminated only by flickering torches, these ancient people beautifully painted the wild world they saw around them. They painted massive herds of charging bison, wild running horses, and fierce cave lions, all miraculously captured in a breathtaking illusion of motion and life. You have to realize that these gorgeous murals weren't just idle caveman doodles. Creating them required massive amounts of dangerous effort. They had to build heavy wooden scaffolding to reach the high ceilings, keep fat-burning lamps lit in oxygen-poor depths, and crush rare minerals to mix vibrant pigments. These dark caves were, in every way, the very first magnificent cathedrals of humanity. Beyond the cave walls, they also spent hours carving beautiful, mysterious little Venus figurines, small, exaggerated statues celebrating the magic of fertility and the power of the female human form. This was the birth of portable art, a deeply personal piece of culture and comfort that they could carry in their pockets on their long, dangerous journeys into the unknown. And where there is art, there is almost always melody. Music gracefully appeared during this time too. Delicate flutes, incredibly carved from the hollow wing bones of massive birds, have been found by archaeologists, dating back over 40,000 long years. Thanks to these simple instruments, the terrifying dark nights of the Ice Age were no longer silent. This incredible sudden explosion of shared culture, complex spoken language, and vastly superior technology is exactly what gave our ancestors the ultimate edge. It allowed Homo sapiens to outhunt, outlast, and eventually replace the mighty Neanderthals, successfully spreading our unique species to every single frozen, burning, and forested corner of the globe. Eventually, the deep freeze couldn't last forever. As the world's great, crushing ice sheets finally began to melt and retreat around 12,000 years ago, the global climate stabilized. And with that massive warming shift, the long, dramatic era of the Paleolithic quietly drew to a peaceful close. The world was changing, and so were we. The endless generations of wandering hunter-gatherers would soon make a historic decision to finally settle down in one place. They would notice how seeds grow. They would begin to plant vast fields of crops, build permanent, sturdy homes out of mud and brick, and kickstart the world-changing Neolithic revolution. But even as we sit surrounded by modern technology, we must never, ever forget the deep, ancient lessons of the Stone Age. That brutal, unforgiving era is what physically forged our bodies, wired our modern minds, and deeply ingrained the complex social nature that still drives every single one of us today. It is a humbling fact to realize that for roughly 99% of human history on this planet, we were simply struggling stone tool makers. Despite our modern cities and glowing screens, deep down in our DNA, we are still the resilient children of the crushing ice, the roaring fire, and the sharpened rock. This was the incredible reality of the Stone Age. It is the bedrock foundation of absolutely everything we are as a species today. And yet, looking back from where we stand now, that ancient, millions of years long journey had only just begun. If you've been thoroughly enjoying this deep dive and you haven't liked the video yet, please take a quick moment to support the channel down below. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our upcoming epic journeys deep into our incredibly rich human past.